Hello, I am Miss C from the Capital District. Thank you for joining me as I walk you through my adventure in a box that I created called Fur, Feathers, and Ferns. I made this adventure box mostly in my yard and nearby to teach you the requirements of this bear adventure by recording several video clips and taking pictures. In it, you will learn how to complete the requirements, and I will show you me completing requirements. Several of them actually. I will show you tools and equipment and provide some safety tips that might help you when you follow your own steps to complete these requirements. Here they are. There are 7 requirements with this adventure box. You must do the first one and then pick 3 others to earn this adventure. First, which one you must do, while hiking or walking for 1 mile, identify 6 signs that any mammals, birds, insects, reptiles, or plants are living near where you choose to hike. And we do this in this adventure together. 2, visit one of the following: a zoo, wildlife refuge or rescue, native center, aviary, game preserve, local conservation area, or fish hatchery. Describe what you learned during your visit, and you can do that yourself. 3, name one animal that has become extinct in the last 100 years and one that is currently endangered. Explain what caused their declines. This will require research on your part. We don't do that in this activity. 4, observe wildlife from a distance and describe what you saw. Some tools that we use to do this are our eyes, binoculars, and a spotting scope. We do this during our adventure. 5, opposite of that, from a distance, use a magnifying glass to examine plants more closely. Describe what you saw that you couldn't see without magnifying glasses. We definitely do this a few times. 6, learn about composting and how vegetable waste can be turned into fertilizer. We spend a lot of time looking at Miss C's compost garden. And 7, finally, plant a vegetable or herb garden. We do spend a lot of time in the garden here, learning about starting seeds and planting an outdoor garden. So let's get started. One of the first things that you will do when planting a garden is to figure out if you're going to plant it inside or outside. Now that could depend on the season of the year, or if you have space outside to grow a garden, and what kind of garden you want to plant. In this video, you're going to see a vegetable and herb garden, and we have planted it outside, but if you are going to do an indoor garden, the best things in terms of vegetables and herbs in an indoor garden would be things that do well in small containers, like some of the herbs you can see at the back of the video here are the sage and oregano, the plants behind that little wooden structure. Those grow well in containers inside, generally all throughout the year, if you have good light and the right kind of container. But for this video, we are outside and we have reworked the ground. In other words, we have dug it up and weeded the ground in a garden outside using several tools, which I'll describe later. So you're going to figure out where you're going to plant your garden and then prepare it in terms of the soil, clearing an area, perhaps putting a little fence around it, or protecting it in other ways from birds or deer, things like that that want to eat your garden and might try to do it before you get a chance to eat what's grown. So we have done that out here in terms of preparing it for a new crop for the year. And that is easily done using a shovel, a hoe, pick. You can use a garden spade or other things like that to clear out a place of dirt which is well drained and not going to let water stand in it, so that seeds might not float away when it rains, but the water will drain away well after the soil gets wet. Over here you can see a little area that we've protected, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Protected from having deer come into the space where we've planted some onions. But how much area you're going to use and what you're going to plant is totally up to what you're limited to and what you would like to plant and the time of the year. This is a little small area that we have dug up the soil around, and we're going to put some vegetables in it. So when we were planning our garden at the beginning of the season, we decided what we wanted to plant. And depending on the time of year, you can start plants inside before it's warm enough to plant them outside. The old tales say that you should never plant anything before Mother's Day, but this year we decided to get started on it early at home. And so I bought several of these seed trays, which come like this. You can also use maybe eggshell cartons and fill with dirt to put your seeds in. So these have little bits of soil wrapped in some fabric here, and you moisten them and put one seed in the top or two seed in the top of each one of those. Indoors, cover them, keep them moist, and in several days you will have some sprouts, depending on how many days it says that in the seed packet they're going to sprout. So these are all the different things here, the seeds that we planted that way, and some we waited until it was warm enough in April and May to plant them directly outside. Some do better pre-planting them indoors, and some do better planting them directly in the soil in the garden. So I have a little tray here of some of the things that I've been talking about, showing. Some tomatoes, okra, white eggplant, there's a crazy looking carrot, some cabbage, zucchini, and broccoli. And these are all the different seeds that we used. We also had turnips. Here's an interesting thing I wanted to show you about being thrifty when you want to plant. I'll show you the potato plants in the garden, but sometimes if you don't eat the potatoes that you buy and you let them sit around too long, they will start to send out little roots we called eyes. So earlier we cut up potatoes just like this into individual pieces, one piece around each one of these little rooted eyes, and planted them in the garden. So we didn't need any seeds for that. Also, the marigolds that we're growing, once the flowers die, you can open up the bottom of them, dried out, and there's a bunch of seeds that we can use to plant the next time we want to plant marigolds. Same thing with the zinnias. Those dried out flowers in the bottom here are zinnia seeds that we can use save and plant next year. Very thrifty. Here are some of the tools that we use to plant the garden this year. There's a spade on the left here, and a weed puller there. You can use that to dig with. We use that kind of hoe axe, double-sided hoe, and a shovel. And there is another type of hoe. We also use a large and a small mechanical machine called rototiller, which will dig up the soil for you. And they are gasoline powered. Sometimes you can buy them electric as well. We used all these things to plant our garden and as well to keep the weeds out of it.
You got instructions for the camera? Sure.
So here we have what's called weeding a garden. And there was broccoli in the garden this morning. We pulled the broccoli out because it was no longer producing good broccoli. And we're preparing this garden for our fall crops. I'm not sure what they're going to be, but that's all the exciting part about the garden, is you can do what you want to do if you're doing it with the right tools and the right time of year. Here we have lemongrass, which is a great herb to cook with, parsley, some lovely basil. It's gotten quite big. Some oregano in the back, sage there on the left, and some rosemary. Nice cooking herb garden here. And over in the little boxed area, we have planted rows and rows of leeks. Interesting about them is you plant them in deeper trenches, and as they grow, you fill up the dirt, and the root system gets larger and larger but is covered by dirt. Very interesting crop, similar to very mild onions. Here we have amazing sweet corn that we planted from seed. And because they've gotten so tall here and we've had a lot of rain and wind, we decided to stake them up to support them so they don't get knocked over in the wind and the rain. They have a very interesting root system as well. You can see how their shoots go down into the ground for water. Pretty tall up. These have started to tassel at the top and are forming little corn plants, little corn on the cobs in there. Oop. So bees and birds, other insects, are very important pollinators to make sure that the corn actually forms. Here's some smaller ones. We planted about 3 weeks ago, our second crop. And moving back, you can see the comparison between the really tall corn. It's about 12 feet now, and the smaller corn, which is about 3 feet tall. Comparing them to the sunflowers, which I planted in March from seed, it's now July. Those are a little over 13 feet tall now, and are very beloved by birds for their seeds and bees for their pollen. These are very beautiful plants. They're called okra, which is a vegetable. Controversial vegetable. Some people don't like it at all, and others just love it. Very southern style vegetable. You can see the little okras forming. There's some very tiny ones here. Have a couple of large rows of those. It seems like pretty much in the morning the blossoms will open And then by the next day, the blossoms are gone. You can see these have closed already. And underneath of that will be like this. A little okra grows out. And when they get to be, I don't know, about 3 or 4 inches long, we pick them. So these okras do extremely well in hot, sun, rainy weather. So they've probably grown about 2 feet in the last 2 to 3 weeks. We've had so much rain and sun. Also, bees are very integral to the production of these because they're pollinating the flowers. I don't know if you can see them, but there are several large bees on these plants. Might even be able to see one sleeping here, I don't know. Every once in a while I'll turn a leaf and I'll see a big bumblebee sitting on the leaves, taking a rest. We've got a lot of bird baths and things here to encourage the birds to come, and a few hummingbird feeders, which I'll talk about later. These are lovely plants. A lot of flowers coming on them too. Here is a very underweeded part of my garden that has cabbages in it. This is a very lovely green cabbage and some purple cabbages that have been sort of overwhelmed with all the grass the last few days. Lots of rain. I just picked this cabbage, a little bit smaller than this one. Pull it off by the stalk on the bottom and pull off the outer leaves, and there you have a really lovely vegetable. Make some coleslaw or other things. Lettuce wraps with cabbage works pretty well. These purple ones that you can't really see very well are also really nice for eating. They're still a little small. They'll be ready in another couple of weeks. Yes, lots of work to keep up a garden this size. We're a little overwhelmed with all of these leaves. Here are all from one watermelon plant. And here are the flowers. And those are also pollinated by bees and hummingbirds to other portions of the plant, which I'm trying to step through. And here you can see a little watermelon. It's very exciting. Here. Oops. Little watermelon. It's grown pretty fast. That plant is all from one vine, one plant that we planted about a month ago, and it's kind of taken over everything. There, the bigger leaves is also a vining type of plant called a cantaloupe. You can see this is very happy here. We'll have many watermelons off of this plant. I'll show you another one here. It's a little bit bigger. There's a little one and a much larger one hiding under the leaves. It's kind of exciting. All of a sudden you'll be looking for something and look down and there's another lovely fruit growing. But you can see it's really reaching across the garden and taking over. We'll have a lot of watermelons this year. Here we have collard greens that have been attacked by pests, as we were talking about earlier. There's a lot of bugs that like to eat on the garden just like we do. And we have powdered them with some safe insecticide that will not harm birds or bees or animals, but just the pests that are eating on it. And here are some white eggplants. Most people see purple eggplants in the store and at restaurants, but we decided to try something called ghost eggplants this year. So those have a lot of vegetables coming on them. We have about 6 or 7 of those plants. And moving over behind them are some tiny little new asparagus plants that we planted this year. This is what they look like when they're grown up and not really like the kind that you're used to seeing that you eat. You have to let them grow up to these ferny-like plants for a couple of years before the asparagus is good to eat. So this is sort of a long-term play when you plant asparagus roots. It takes a year or 2 for you to get good asparagus off of them. As you can see, the stems are not very thick, and you want to have them a little bit thicker than that before you eat them. If you just let them go, they turn into beautiful fern-like plants. Oh, Miss C's got a lot of work to do to get the weeds out of this garden. We do stake these things up to hold them up so they don't get broken over by animals or rabbits or the wind, and it lets them grow stronger. Here's cantaloupe, or not cantaloupe, I'm sorry, cucumber. You can see a cucumber and lots of the lovely flowers there, little cucumbers. Also, we have dusted this to keep the worms off of there from eating the leaves. You can see they've been chewing on them. And some dill, which is ready for us to harvest. These are the dill seeds that are actually their flowers that turn in when they dry out. You get the seeds off. I'm too close to show it well, but these I planted from seed in February and then protected them through a couple of very cold nights, several times covering them up. We covered them with tarps when it would get cold, but they're very large now and ready to cut off and use for seasoning dishes that you use dill with. Also, you can cut the ferny part off and dry that. It smells good over here. These are garlic chives, the other side of my leek garden, and we've got tons of tomatoes finally coming on. It takes warm, humid nights for tomatoes to ripen. They don't like cold weather very much, so once it starts staying warm at night, they'll ripen up pretty fast. And along here, I cut up some old potatoes that were probably past the point of eating them and planted them in the garden. They're little purple potatoes, and now we have potato plants here. The interesting thing about potato plants is once that they start to die back, they'll have flowers. As you can see, the little white flower. They will flower, and then the plant will start to die back and turn brown. And that is, they're sort of starting to curl up a little bit. And once the leaves start to curl up and the plant starts to turn brown, that's when you know the potatoes underneath are ready to dig up. I might show you that a little bit later. I'm not sure I'm ready to dig up any potatoes yet. One thing about a vegetable garden is you have to keep up with what it produces. And if you're not ready to eat when it's ready to produce, then you have trouble. So you really work to create a garden, but it also provides a lot of work and a lot of food to keep up with the produce so it doesn't spoil. When it's ready to be picked, it is ready to be picked. Sometimes not even a day can go by that you can leave something on one of these plants before it will start to spoil. Just a minute ago, I missed recording. There was a nice little bumblebee that had stuck its head into this flower here. to pollinate it and backed out to move around to another flower and work on pollinating that. But this happens so quickly when it starts to get really warm out in the afternoon. The flower will close, like I said. Here's one closed up. You can see it in the sun. Closed up nice and tight. And then the little vegetable will form after the flower drops off. You can see one there. And what happens when the petals drop off, the flower falls to the ground and it leaves behind the little vegetable that is forming. And part of what we do with composting here in our garden is we let some of the leaves, as they are decomposing, fall to the ground and create compost, which I will show you later. We have a very big compost bin, and what composting is a natural way to let parts of the plant, a grass, here's a leaf that has died and fallen off the plant, so speeding things up, I crumble it and let it go back into the soil to feed the other plants. Here is one of the buds that has fallen off in the past day or so, left behind, and here's some rhubarb plants that we have. We do let the leaves, the first year we plant, the leaves fall off, and we don't cut the rhubarb in the first year so that it's stronger in the second year. But that leaf right there that looks like it's brown, turning brown, we'll let that drop to the ground, and as it dies it will provide nutrition and moisture for the plant and become soil after it is completely composted and rotted away. You can do the same thing. Sometimes people do that when cutting their lawn. Instead of bagging the grass or raking it away, you can leave the grass on your lawn to turn brown, and they call that composting the grass, as we do. You can hear the lawnmower in the background, but it provides extra nutrition and moisture for the grass and is a more natural way to manage your lawn. This is the garden in the hot sun. A little bit about composting. Composts are made from scraps of vegetables and fruits, things that you don't need to use because maybe they're spoiled from your garden. I put coffee grounds, used coffee grounds, eggshells, sometimes even the dryer lint from the dryer. All kinds of things are going into this compost pile we have. So compost really means that you are taking natural materials and putting them all together, keeping them moist and warm, and they break down to form almost like a soil-like material. They can be used to provide fertilizer for your plants, great place to grow worms, and best thing of all is that I think that the Environmental Protection Agency has estimated that perhaps as much as 25% of our trash that goes to the recycle centers and the trash dumps are materials that could be composted for the garden. So it's great if you can, instead of throwing away vegetables and fruits that you don't eat, and you have an area where you can do composting for a garden, that you try that, and it will put those natural items back into the earth when you use them to spread in the garden. So here we have a bunch of garden weeds that we put on top. Oh, I can't really. And we have spread grass and weeds on top of this, but underneath is a layer of probably squash and things that we've cut up from peas and beans and other things in the garden. At the bottom of this enclosure, and that will be spread on the garden later this year as it breaks down more with the heat and the rain, becomes more like fertilizer. Very rich material to spread on the garden, put back in nitrogen for your plants. Also great to do that with your yard if you're cutting grass and want to have a more natural yard. Instead of bagging or raking the clippings from the grass, if you just leave it on the grass, that provides great fertilizer for the grass from itself. You can see we were leaving these leaves on the plant. We'll let drop off the sunflower, and they're already pretty much close to being crush them up and put them back in the soil underneath, and they provide great fertilizer going back into the soil from the plant that it came from. It's a very natural process. Things you should not compost are things that can attract rodents, flies, other bugs like that. So meat products, dairy products, chemical products, weeds, plants that have been treated with chemicals. Those things should never go into your compost pile because they will cause more problems with pests, rats, stuff like that that you don't want in your garden. So the best thing for compost is natural materials, and you can cover that. That will pile, we cover that every night with a piece of tarp, and it keeps it moist and warm and continues its decomposition, breaking down into more soil-like materials. It takes a couple of months, and generally, certainly by next planting season, the more we add on to that, the faster those things will decompose into really nice material for us to use as fertilizer. The next thing we're going to talk about is the first and only absolute requirement of this adventure box, and that is hiking, taking a walk for 1 mile, and exploring the things that you see and using different tools. Great idea to do with your scout den, other adults, in safe numbers. It's a really fun thing to do this time of year, and will be part of the adventure box that is a requirement. This is my favorite part of the adventure. Getting out into nature and seeing what's around you is really important, especially when you're doing your Cub Scout adventure. Enjoy it. Part of this adventure for Fur Feathers and Ferns is, while walking or hiking for 1 mile, identify 6 signs that any mammals, birds, insects, reptiles, or plants are living near the place where you choose to hike or walk. Also, you can visit a wildlife refuge, a nature center, game preserve, local conservation area, wildlife rescue group, or fish hatchery, and describe what you learned during that time. So you can also, in this adventure, observe wildlife from a distance and describe what you saw. Using a magnifying glass, identify plants more closely and describe what you saw through the glass that you could not see without it, and learn about composting and how vegetable waste can be turned into fertilizer for plants. Then plant a garden. So we're going to show you most of those things in these video clips today. I'm going to take a little walk, and this is my hike for you. I have my magnifying glass, also observing wildlife through my binoculars here, which I take with me whenever I go on hikes. Oh, here is the first thing I can observe. Here's some berry plants, raspberries. You can see the berries on them. There's only one left. I would say that is definitely a sign that wildlife has been here. squirrels or birds love to eat berries, it's pretty clear that they have done that. And using the magnifying glass, you can't really see very fine detail without it, but using the magnifying glass, you can get right down in there. Hard to see with the reflection, but see the very fine details of the seeds on the raspberry. Also, immediately I can see that there's a path near me that we didn't make in this wildlife area. That path has been made by wildlife, and I would say probably deer and rabbits that come through this area. You can hear the birds there. So a little ways down through this hike, you can see more berries. Definitely the birds have been eating. Going down into the wildlife area, a couple more signs to indicate that there has been wildlife through here, other than some more pathways, which you can see. You can definitely hear the locusts are making lots of noise today. When I was down here earlier today, I found a lot of dirt that had been dug up, and you can see signs like that. That's a clue that some animal has been digging, either looking to bury nuts, which would be a squirrel, or maybe digging for insects like worms or ants to eat. And so there's lots of different reptiles that will do that. We do have skinks through here. Sometimes squirrels will dig up looking for a place to hide their nuts. We have black walnut trees in this area of the woods, and so here is a sign that squirrels have been here, because there's some black walnuts here. Here is one fallen to the ground, and then some empty shells that you can see where the squirrels have cracked clean through the opening, or the outer case of the black walnut, opened it up, pulled the shell out, and ate what was inside. So they do have very sharp teeth, and they're good at what they do. You could take the magnifying glass and see extra detail that you can't see with your bare eye. Look at the detail on that nut. Again, things that I always take with me when I'm on a hike are my binoculars and a magnifying glass, because it's really interesting to see things you wouldn't normally be able to see without it. I look for bugs and logs to see. It's pretty clear there's evidence along here that lots of ants and bugs have been eating in this wood. And I did set up earlier today a bird spotting scope on this little pathway, because this is a favorite place of mine to see wild birds. And I left that here to come back. So often there will be cardinals and woodpeckers and things back here in the wooded area. And the spotting scope helps me really zoom in and see them like they're just in front of me. There's another little bit of a path. Might be kind of hard to see, but that is definitely a deer path. And up in the trees, I don't see any right now, but there'll be evidence along the pathway of squirrels building nests. And many of these berry plants are growing because birds have eaten the fruit from them, and through their waste have dropped remnants of berry seeds in here, and so now there's a whole bunch of raspberry plants growing through this wooded area. Pine cones, birds will take, and squirrels love to eat these pine cones too, so they do take them off of the trees up here, spread them on the ground, and eat them. So there's some more evidence that wildlife has been through this area. You can see that trail is made by deer down through here. Also have a very big groundhog that lives on the side of the hill out back. But here's an interesting thing to take a look at with your magnifying glass, the detail of the bark of that tree, which you would not be able to see this well without the glass. So taking hikes is a really wonderful way to get exercise and to see all the different wildlife that lives around in your area. I encourage you to do that whenever you can, when the weather is good. Dress properly and follow all the safety guidelines. Make sure that you are protecting yourself against ticks and bugs, snakes and things like that. Maybe they're not a problem in your area. I like to wear long pants whenever I take a hike to keep myself from getting scratched up. It's a great thing to do with friends and other scouts. So thanks for joining me on this little hike. One last look at Miss C's garden for the night and for this adventure box. I hope you enjoyed my garden. It's really a beautiful place of peace. And thank you for letting me share this adventure box. This is Miss C, signing off. This is Miss C, signing off from this bear adventure. Remember, to complete this adventure, you need to complete requirement number 1, which is to take a hike or a walk for a mile or more and describe what you saw, as well as completing 3 others. I hope you enjoyed this adventure as much as I did. Thank you very much, and I also hope to see you again in person soon. Bye-bye.